Hello, hello, hello. We are back in business. How's everyone doing? Got the judge stick. Maybe you can actually see a little bit. I'm using a notebook that I grabbed a hold of at Poisoned Pen Bookshop in Old Town Scottsdale. I found this new journal I'm going to use and write in. I have a journal that the lefty twin brother of the underarm, or what would be not sidearm. He's like a below sidearm thrower in Tyler Roger, who's a relief pitcher for the San Francisco Giants. His twin brother, Taylor Rogers, who they all have the spirit of the owl in them. Taylor got me this notebook at the end of the year last year as a gift, and it's done wonders for me. They all do. And I think if you go one of my solos, which I actually feel like I tried way too hard in that one. I was disappointed with that one, but I did a solo show about creating something from nothing. And I put all my journals on the desk in front of me. And it was actually a really overwhelming experience when I did that. And I was frustrated afterwards. But hey, art is art. So some people like it, some people don't. Shout out to Rick Rubin. The best art divides the audience. Anyways, I love journals. And I didn't have it in me to hit this journal with the judge stick. So I went with this one, which actually I kind of maybe did that unknowingly, but I just got this journal. And it is based off of some sort of patterning from Shakespeare. And so I read that and I went, gotta have it. Gotta have that journal. So shout out to Taylor Rogers. I hope the owl is speaking to you in wisdom and in ways in which is guiding your journey, however it needs to be guided, and you're in connection with the source. I gotta be honest, I think I'm a week away from finishing your journal, and then I'm going to start this Shakespeare one. I really appreciate the love always from the Rogers brothers, two of the coolest, most genuine dudes you will come across. Anyways, Coffee Buzz Friday, episode 2. Loved the feedback and the energy around Coffee Buzz Friday. I even get a little jittery before I dive into this a little bit and I start thinking about what I'm going to talk about, because the solo shows have been interesting, right? I've interviewed guests for a long time, but the solo shows have been interesting to me because I've just never been able to. I've gotten more comfortable saying this as I've gotten older, obviously, because I've been able to say this just through validity and credibility of things in the last couple of years, but I've never been able to script anything. I have ideas of what I want to talk about, and when I coach and teach, I remember when I first started teaching, I never ever stuck to the script. Even my first job at Minnesota State in 2012, 2013, they'd given me a curriculum to give to the students. I was teaching a class, coaching theories. It's a 300 level class. I'm not going to get into the depths of how it all came about, but I kind of got thrown into the mix and I was going to teach this class, and they were paying me. I was a professor. I had the whole bit. I had a 40-person class. I gave everyone A's, B's, C's. I remember people got D's and were just pissed, and people would email me, call me Professor Martin. And I was a student at the school. I played baseball at the school at the time. And the point is, they gave me a curriculum and I tried to follow that. And even the first couple classes that I did were my least favorite because I just couldn't do it. I don't know why. I've never been able to do that. My mind gets going and wanders. And once it starts wandering, it's like it takes me for the ride. And once I'm on the ride, it ends when it ends. And so a script or content has just never registered with me because it makes me think too hard and I lose my train of thought by trying to follow something. I don't know if people feel like that or not, but I've always felt like that. When I got into coaching, I was coaching baseball. And when I first started teaching, analytics and technology was really big. Like 2015, it was really starting to explode. Now you can't coach. It just doesn't seem like you can coach sports without understanding technology and how to regurgitate the data and explain that and run. There's machines called like TrackMan and Hawkeyes, and there's sprint speeds, and in the sports world, they just track everything. And I just wasn't able to grab it. I wasn't able to work in that framework. And I was embarrassed when I first got into it because A, I really didn't want to. It just seemed like extra work. And then B, I didn't vibe with it. So obviously I don't think you do things that you don't understand as well. And C, I wasn't curious about the technology. So I didn't do it. And I found a bunch of ways to navigate myself out of having to be a technical coach or understanding science or technology and implementing it into sports. I was always sort of sly in that way to find my way out of early blenders in the coaching, teaching world. But fast forward to now I just sort of press play still and see what happens. And it feels more comfortable now because I've gotten so many reps in it, and it's just kind of become my jam. Like it's kind of become actually somewhat of my edge. But I had to explore that in my 20s for sure. I had to find out what that meant. And so, yeah, I think the solo shows have been interesting because in the solo shows, I really just press play and I see what happens. And the one that I did last week, I was trying to do something. I was trying to follow a script. I had the notebooks in front of me. I had this idea of what I wanted to talk about. And I think that it had some bits and pieces of it that came out pretty good, but overall I was pretty disappointed with it just because of what I'm talking about. It just seemed like I was trying too hard, and anytime I try too hard, my shows run long. Even the early ones I did on the solo shows that came out a month or two ago, they're just longer. They're longer because I'm trying really hard, and that's not a negative. For me, at least. Maybe you guys like them or don't like them. I'm not sure, because I don't think that's the point of the art. It's just a feedback loop for myself. I notice that about myself, that when I'm crisp and I just go with because when I press play, the thoughts start coming, and maybe it takes me a second to sort through them. But the second I get on the tracks of a conversation I want to have, I'll be able to go with it. And then that becomes the euphoric high. That's what I like about art. I like seeing what happens out of it. So I'm learning that with the solo show for sure. But Coffee Buzz is fun because Coffee Buzz, I get questions from you guys, and now we kind of get to do something together. So we get to have engagement together. And I'm going to answer 4 questions today from different people, just like last time I answered 4 questions from different people. And it just sort of engages. It just engages somewhat of a community. And community is really important for me, for all of us. And I think that'll actually lead into one of the questions now that I say it. But as I'm kind of trying to understand what my show does, what my platform is, it's also trying to find who my community is and where do I fit in, or what are we liking? What are we enjoying? What's helping us improve? What's making us think? And what's fun, right? Coffee Buzz has always been fun. It was years ago, and it is now, and I can't wait. I'll probably be back in Minnesota for a little bit this summer, and I'm going to push some of the boys that live back up there to get back on with me and hopefully have some guests. But back to this solo show versus Coffee Buzz, the Coffee Buzz is still organic. But I think it's smoother than the solo show because I still have a framework of questions. So it's like I just opened up my phone before this, I put it on the computer, and I have 4 questions that I saw that I'll answer. And now I've seen them, but I don't know what's going to come out of this yet. I don't know what we're going to say. But the questions at least give me the structure. And as I've gotten older, I've learned the importance of objective structure and subjective thinking or subjective expression. And I think that's the bond of art in its fullest. You still need some level of structure and discipline and knowing what you're going to do so you can stay in a framework. And then you need to be able to go off and step outside of the box and bring your own mixed or your own flavor to the recipe, if you will. So that's what we're going to do. Let's kick into it. Let's dive in. So the first question, we're going to start a little light, and I'll poke at this question because this guy could do a lot better. I hate putting him on. Actually, I don't know if I hate putting him on blast. I'll call him after this to tell him I put him on blast. And you'll probably see him. He was on episode 51, Mr. Nick Bugstead. And Nick's become a really good friend of mine, but he asked a question. He's a deep thinker. He's an intellectual buddy of mine. He's a philosopher in his own sense. And he's played professional sports for a long time. Professional hockey. I don't know if sports plural. He's only played one sport for a long time. But he asked me this question, and he said, why do they call it a fast when it goes so slow? So we have our stick, and we're going to let it rip. So why N. Bugstead, that's his tag, why do they call it a fast when it goes so slow? Maybe it wasn't a bad question, because I guess the way in which I'm hearing the question is, why do they call it a fast, as if fast in the actual sense of we're getting somewhere faster. But I think the fast in the way in which, why do they call it a fast when it goes so slow? I would imagine he's talking about fasting in the dietary section of how we eliminate our ability to eat food and let our body process no food, and we start to fast. You have intermittent fasting, which I think is just not eating it in the morning. Intermittent fasting, from the way I've understood it, is you essentially eat from midnight to 8 p.m. And so you have an 8-hour window. And then that gives you a 16-hour window of no food. So you stop eating at 8 and you wait until noon the next day. And I've enjoyed that, really. I've done that a lot in my life. I think I've done that a lot as a business person or an athlete or someone who works in sports, not because I want to. I think it's just when I get up in the morning and I don't eat, I think a little faster. I'm a little bit quicker. I can move quicker. And when I have a big breakfast, I just don't feel like I move as fast. I'm not thinking as fast because I'm digesting food. And so I think naturally I just kind of get up, and once I get going and moving and getting the coffee in me, I just don't want to eat food. I want to be moving. And so I've enjoyed the intermittent fasting style. I've also, one of the things that I like about the fasting style from that way is I still won't eat heavy when I have my first meal. Some yogurt, some fruit, maybe a cup of tea, maybe sometimes like another cup of coffee. I have to be careful about that. And just some protein, maybe a protein shake, sometimes little snack foods like ham. I'm really into ham for some reason, like lunch ham, and some cheese. And I'll just have snacks, so I'm not really having that much. And then I'll smash a big dinner around 6:30 or 7. That'll be my last meal for the day. Last night I had a huge steak, ribeye steak, Brussels sprouts and bacon, which is my favorite. And then try not to eat. And I can do that pretty regularly. But I think if I go to one thing to finish this thought about fasting in general, and then I'll get to the actual answer I think is coming to me, is fasting is really important. Actually, I shouldn't say that. You shouldn't take any of my advice on this, but I will say that I fasted one time for 3 days straight, no food, just water. And it was a very impactful experience in my life. It was actually really spiritual. And it transcended me in a lot of ways. I did it after I got done playing. And when I was playing sports, I was always trying to gain weight and get stronger. So I would eat. And then all of a sudden, I did a 3-day fast one time. And without going into the massive details, maybe that's for another day. By the third day, I had so much energy. I slept really good. I was actually lifting and working out without eating for 3 days. And I was working. I could maintain conversation with such clarity, and it really broke my perspective to hangry and feeling like I have to eat all the time, or I can't do things. I haven't been the same since. I mean, that was probably 7 or 8 years ago, maybe even longer now. I haven't been the same since I did that. My relationship to food drastically changed. And I think that's how I probably naturally got into an intermittent fasting way of living. Because we just don't have to eat as much as we think we do. I mean, realistically, just think about when we were nomadic. There's no way we were eating all throughout the day and having 3 meals, 4 meals. There's no way we were just snacking. We couldn't. because we were tracing our food. And if you got a big buffalo, I mean, you just fill up. But there's got to be times in life in our history we were fasting. So why do they call it a fast when it goes so slow? I think it's because when you stop eating, like I did a couple of years ago for those 3 days, you become so in tune with your body that you become present. And when we become present, I think things start to slow down. And so I think the spiritual aspect of fasting is the actual action of being obedient to not eating. And because you can't get to day 4 until it gets to day 4, you have to slow down and you have to be in the moment, because the only way to get to day 4 is to do day 1 and day 2 and day 3. And so I think that's why it goes so slow. And I think that that's when we eliminate food from us, it becomes such a natural healer, and it becomes a slow process because it's a transcending process. So that's my answer. Judge Stick. Would you rather not be able to hear music again or taste food again? Coach Hank. Shout out Coach Hank, Andy Hankemeyer. This guy's got one of the best left-handed swings in the Midwest for sure. Potentially the nation. Not enough people got to see it. Got to see the swing, but it's a sweet swing. He's one of those guys, he's just kind of put together physically, and he's got it dialed in. But to move through his question, I like this question. I don't know if I have to give it as deep of a thought, which isn't good or bad. It's just I think it's just you pick one, and that's what it is. Would you rather not be able to hear music again or taste food again? It's really incredible, right? Because I think anytime you take away a sense, you eliminate part of your experience to reality. So that would be really tough to deal with that. And that would be a really big bummer to lose a sense 100%. I think for me, it would be, I would rather lose my taste to food, because then I could just get into very direct, then I could just get into very direct ways of eating, and it wouldn't matter anymore. I would just use food for fuel. So then fuel would become an expression to vitality. And I think that it just wouldn't matter. I could get to like the most bluntness of nutrition and just use exactly what my body needs, because I wouldn't have any of the craving for sweets or overconsumption, like we just talked about the fasting. Ironic how they both are mixing together. So shout out to Nick and Andy for bringing it home for the food aspect. And so, music, on the other hand, music is so, and I think food is too. Food is such a medicine. So I think all this is connected to a higher being. But music is so sourceful for me. It's so euphoric, and it can strike so many emotions in me, more so than food. And I think that's just my personal perspective. There's only certain foods and meals that really get me going, and some do. And when they do, it's amazing. But, yeah, I would use it. I would go with music, because I think I could achieve more in my life. I think I could go further materially. I think I'd have more success in my life if I eliminated my taste for food over music. I think I'd be able to. I would rather have that aspect. So that's that one. I hope that lands with you, or if it doesn't, it doesn't. So let's move forward. These two are a little deeper, so I saved these two for this thought. I'm going to need a drink there before I get into it. Okay. We're going to go with Sammy_Y22. Shout out to Sammy. I appreciate you sending this question in, brother. I believe you are a coach and a teacher. So I'm curious what sparked you to ask this question, but we're going to let it rip. So it's a beautiful question. So the question is, are we born for a specific purpose? And then this isn't a question, but it says in a tribal sense. So I'm going to rip, because that we could interpret that differently. And I don't want to try to interpret it how you're saying it. I'd probably have to be talking to you to get a better grip on that. So with all due respect, I'm probably, and maybe I do get to the tribal sense, I'm going to stick with, are we born for a specific purpose? Are we born for a specific purpose? I think that I'm going to start nihilistic to begin with this, because I don't think that there's any meaning to any of this. I don't think there's any purpose. I don't think that we are born for a specific purpose. I don't think that I was born to be a baseball player. And I don't think that I was born to be a coach, even though I really feel connected to teaching people. It's something that's seemed easy to me since I got started. It was something I definitely knew I was going to just be good at. And I still don't think I was born to be a teacher. I don't think I can say and materialize and give you tangible evidence that this is my calling. This is what I was born to do. So in that way, no, I don't think we're born for a specific purpose. I think we're just kind of here and we're observing the world, and we're here at this pocket of our generation, at this century, at this time in history. And we're experiencing this development of society and humanity, and there's really no meaning to any of it. And the reason why I say that is because I believe that this is all an illusion. This microphone's made up. This podcast is made up. Coffee Buzz Friday is made up. This question was made up. Our jobs are made up. Our names are made up, et cetera, et cetera. Everything that we do and see in material is an illusion of fabric and material put together through consciousness, which really has no purpose at all. It doesn't matter to play sports. It's an entertainment factor that, from my understanding, we started developing entertainment at large scale during the Roman days because we had more time. Life was becoming easier. We had more scientific studies, we were more medically evolved. We were starting to have a deeper structure with work, and therefore we had time on our hands. And so we started creating entertainment with the Roman Empire and gladiators, if you will. And now we just have entertainment 24/7, 7 days a week, all the time. You can find entertainment. And it's escalated, and it started with actors back then too, and it just moved into so many things, but it doesn't really matter. We make it matter for the flip side of us having a specific purpose in life. So where I'm going to go with this is that I don't think it matters. I don't think that we have a specific purpose. I don't think anything we're doing really has any meaning to it. I think that we attach to it to experience the world and metaphorically play in the sandbox together. On the flip side of that is the massive freedom in the reasoning for our specific purpose at birth. And I think that the more that we attach to the illusion while simultaneously being detached to our essence, then we find the specific purpose for our birth. Because again, I think that we are an energy that came from nothing, goes back to nothing. And in this loop of nothingness, we have one little environment where we turn into something. That's when we're born. We become a mind and body. And we drive that vehicle through the illusion of time until we die, experiencing what the world has to offer at this point in history. And with that said, none of what we experience in the illusion has any meaning or purpose behind it, besides getting us back to the state of nothing and comprehending the state of nothing while we're alive. And so the human experience becomes an instance where the soul comes down from nothingness and it plays something out in the illusion. And our specific purpose of being born is to add our unique, specific, energetic idea into that whole nucleus, that entire system. So I will find more of me by doing this podcast to the most me as I possibly can do. But the podcast does not matter. The purpose of the podcast, it may or may not help somebody, but that's really not up to me. The meaning of it for me is, what of this am I curating of the idea of my energy into the world? And am I doing that specifically to me and based off of how I was born and incubated out of nothing into something? And if I take one last final shot at the tribal sense, even though I said I wasn't going to, I think that tribally it's because we are all one. We're all one connected being. And that's why we feel so communal and safe in tribes, because me as a singular idea, when I have two, now all of a sudden we have more energy. It's like marriage. I've always equated marriage to 1 + 1 = 3, because the strength of two, it adds a third, and there's more power in groups. We're better off in numbers. And so I think that in a tribal sense, if everybody implements their specific energetic purpose into the cosmos, we have this illusion. Because if it was just me here, I wouldn't be able to hide and seek from anything. I wouldn't have problems to solve. I wouldn't have conversations to understand. There'd be no reason to understand experience and energy as much, if at all, unless I had a tribe. And hopefully, I think if I'm somewhat close to this at all, it would be that we need the tribe to get closer to the outcome of the alchemy here, which would be love. We reach enlightenment through love in a tribal sense, because at some point I have to love something bigger than myself. And in order to do that, I would need a tribe. Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully that lands. If it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't, I suppose. Last one of the day. Let's let it rip. Let's have some fun with this one, because these are from the boys back in Minnesota, and the birthplace of my coaching career, MASH Baseball, _baseball. What's one thing you want the next generation to know? What's one thing I want the next generation to know? What is one thing I want the next generation to know? I think generations are really interesting, because I was birthed and raised by the baby boomers. I'm a millennial. The millennials have really gotten shot at for a while now as being a soft generation. But as I've gotten more and more into this, I think every generation is shot at for being a soft generation. And I think that's a repetitive concept of human history. We just repeat that concept. And I think the hardest thing to do from generation to generation is pass the torch. And I see that with the baby boomers now. I think the baby boomers, knowing that they're on their final leg here, they're having a hard time passing the torch to the millennials. And so much of their input is to tell millennials how wrong we are, or what's wrong with the world. This is a negative way of putting it, but I think this is a good way to explain how this happens. And so, a lot of baby boomers, my perspective, in the workforce, they'll talk about things like technology and the speed of things and how everything's on social now, et cetera, et cetera. And people don't work hard anymore. And this is how it was in my day. But I think the flip side of that is that my generation is largely expanding our ability to understand information. We're not as quick to agree with people. We don't just accept that we have to be in a corporate job for our whole lives. In so many ways, we're extremely expansive. And in so many ways, I think we're the bridge to traditional morals and this new bridge of massive overstimulation in technology. And I think that makes the millennials an incredibly important generation. Now, the baby boomers are incredibly important. The generations that went through the world wars, incredibly important. And from my memories of my grandparents, especially both my grandpas, two very strong, disciplined, obedient men, insane structure and morals. And I still feel both of my grandparents, and I feel them looking at me and watching me to this day. And I have made many decisions where I don't want to upset the spirits of Grandpa Martin specifically. He was a disciplinarian, principal, and teacher. And so that's rubbed off on me. That's a generational shift. And then you see the baby boomers. The baby boomers are interesting, right? I don't know the exact dates on those, but you think about going through the 70s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. That was a really interesting time. But you also see a bunch of baby boomers who are still eating cereal and still riding it out all the way to the final days at the corporate job. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just it's such a byproduct of what times were, and that just doesn't exist anymore. I don't know if they were ripping through intermittent fasting science and literature 45 years ago on social media and having thousands of people give their input, and you had to learn in these times how to sort through information and figure out who you were. And I think that there's positive and negative to all of this. But if I were to take this question and go, what's one thing that I would want the next generation to know? I would take it from what the baby boomers taught my generation. And before we got inundated with technology in my young 20s, we were still taught traditional morals. I don't know if I hit this on the last one. Sorry. We were still taught traditional morals and structure, and we still came up in ways in which we needed to work hard. You needed to be a good son or a good daughter to your parents. You needed to listen to people, talk to people, have meals with people. You needed to play outside. You needed to do all these things. And then when we got into our 20s, we started getting inundated with technology, and we started learning how to use that to interconnect, to network at large scale, how to create businesses without a corporate job. And it started to shatter a bunch of structure. I mean, just think of what's happening in the education process, or the religion's a great example for this, and how the shattering of religion is occurring. And just our ability to learn from anything that we want now. It's an interconnected globe. And I think in one beautiful way that creates what I'm considering the intuition age. We are becoming intuitive after the industrial age. And so the industrial age created these assembly line styles, this public school style, this religious need, and you kind of went into the workforce and you ran it out. And now that's not needed anymore. And so really, in a world in which everybody is now seen and heard, it's becoming unique that makes you successful. And then you have two, and this is be the lesson, because you have two aspects of successful. And I think this will be scary for the second generation, because now you play in a digital world and a physical world, and you can be seen anytime you want. And there's such incentive to grow yourself publicly and your image because of what that can give you resource-wise. And I think there's two things that are going to happen. One, you're going to become what the world thinks you are, and you're going to play a character out for the world to appease the world, and you're going to do that to make it. And the problem with that will be is if you make it and you become really successful monetarily, or you're safe resources-wise, but you're trapped in an imprisonment of something that's not actually you, that would suck. And that would just be painful. And I think that's going to happen more and more with the way that our technology has grown. And then there's a second way to make it. And it's the intuition age. It's learning how to navigate the world and all its information, and listen to baby boomers, people like myself, and millennials, coaches, teachers, listen to thousands of people that are online talking and teaching and selling, listen to the political landscape, listen to the religious landscape, the educational landscape, the workforce, and being able to see all of that and find a way to, because the external exploration has ended. We're no longer externally exploring outside of ourselves. You can go on AI and type in any question and get an answer to anything that you ask it. That is extremely powerful and extremely terrifying. And if this second path that I'm talking about, and the powerful aspect, is learning how to use the current fabric of society to understand information and knowledge in a neutral position, to remain curious and open-minded to the billions and billions and billions of bits of stimulus that you're going to receive. And inside of that, finding the courage and the strength to explore your intuition, your inner self, your inner guide, and not being used or influenced outside of that. And I think that's going to be the hardest thing for the generations to come. So if my one thing that I would want the generation to know is, I would know that as the world becomes more AI, becomes more obviously industrialized already is, as we move more and more away from nature and we disconnect more and more from the essence of being a human, and we feel as if we have to be right all the time, we're getting fact checked, we can get canceled, et cetera, and we feel as if you're in the era now where you have to know everything. I think the opposite side of that is what I would urge the generation to do. And if I bring it full circle and hammer down, I would go back to the lesson I just taught myself about when I first started coaching. Because when I first started coaching, everything was telling me that I needed to learn all this information and I needed to know all this information, and it didn't feel right because I felt like the more that I knew, the less I would understand people. And I knew that teaching was about caring for people. Didn't matter who it was. That's what mattered. And I'm really grateful that I stuck to that, because now in my mid-30s, I can't say something that's more true in my experience than something that does not overcome our biology and its love and care and empathy and compassion for everybody and the suffering that we all go through, and being connected to yourself so that you have the space and the health to have enough of a container to serve the world with your own unique gifts. And I think the best way to do that is to discipline yourself and start finding the new structure, the new morality, the new values that come in silence, and they come in nature, and they come in going to sleep on time and being healthy and being very simple and playing. And I think that'll be the wild transition of this generations to come, is discovering the new moral code of humanity, because the moral code has been broken. And that's exciting. All right. Coffee Buzz Friday. Love you guys. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.